My next guest is Cody Felger. Bring the Juice podcast, and I'm assuming a Colts super fan, fellow Colts super fan. What's going on, Cody?
Oh, not much, man. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm glad you, like we were just talking off air, you're one of the few ones to pronounce the last name right. So appreciate that, man.
Yes, sir. So I found you because I'm a Colts fan. Around Georgia, I feel like there's 5 of us in the entire state. So
Sure.
we're going to talk a couple Colts stuff, which is actually ties into a bunch of big-time NFL news. Cody, let's first start off with the Matthew Stafford trade, because I watched the Pat McAfee show, obviously big-time Colts punter, legendary Colts punter. What was your thoughts on the Matt Stafford trade and what the Lions got for him? Because I don't think the Colts would have given up that much.
No. And it's interesting. There's still some fans who said, oh, the Colts screwed up for not getting Matthew Stafford. And I was just like, no, I disagree strongly. Like, for that type of draft capital that you gave up to get Matthew Stafford, I get he's a good quarterback, but that was just crazy, in my opinion, by the Rams. And also trading Jared Goff as well, a former first pick. So, yeah, overall, there was no chance the Colts were going to put that much into that trade. I honestly would have been upset if the Colts would have made a bigger trade than that. You know what I mean? So, more than a first-round pick. Like, I've said that. My co-host Derek has said that. Like, we would have been a little bit upset if you would have given more than a first-round pick. Like, we were okay with 21 with where the Colts were, right? So you gave that up and maybe like a second or whatever. But for multiple first-round picks and a player and a third-round pick, yeah, that was way too steep in my opinion for the Colts. So as much as I liked Matthew Stafford, I thought they would be a good fit together. Yeah, the price was just way, way too much in my opinion. And I'm glad the Colts didn't pull the trigger there.
So, real quick, who do you think benefited from that trade? Because I'm feeling like the Rams benefited a little bit more, because although they gave up a bunch of stuff, I feel like it was more of a something like they admitted to the league, hey, we screwed up on Jared Goff. I don't know if the Lions are good at drafting.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I don't know anymore what the Lions are with their new management. Maybe they are really good at drafting. I'm not sure exactly. But, I think both sides really benefited from this. Obviously, the Rams, they're wanting to commit to winning now for sure. They think they have the team to go, win a Super Bowl. So as much as I thought that trade was insane, like I don't blame them, because if they feel like they're just a quarterback away from being a Super Bowl contender and they felt like Jared Goff was holding them back, which obviously they did, then I understand it, man. I do. But for the Lions' sake, we all knew that they haven't been good for years, even with Stafford. So to get that haul, like regardless if you draft well or not, just from a value standpoint, they won that in terms of value. But, like you said, like if the Rams go and win a Super Bowl, then maybe we can come back in a year or two and say, hey, the Rams won that trade. So it really, I think for both sides, it made a ton of sense.
Exactly.
In one hand, I'm bummed that the Colts didn't get him, but I'm kind of happy for Detroit because they deserve all that draft capital that they're going to get just for how bad it's been for so long. So, I think for both sides benefited, but from a value standpoint, I think definitely the Lions got a lot, and I'm happy for them. But man, if the Rams get their guy, like good for them.
So let's transition now to Deshaun Watson. As a person who's always vouched for Deshaun Watson, would you give up the same thing for a younger player? I'm not sure what the player. I don't even know if I would want to give a good player at this point. But what would be your package for Deshaun Watson? Do you think Deshaun Watson to the Colts makes sense?
I mean, it does, but I just don't think the Texans will be willing to trade within the division. That's my only thing. And, I think it was rumored the Texans wanted 2 first-round picks, maybe another pick, and 2 defensive players. So, no. Yeah, for me, I don't know if I would do that. I'm not giving really any of our guys up on defense right now.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, you can take a guess at who those would be probably. But yeah, it probably would be something similar. Like, I would be fine with that. I honestly thought that's the kind of trade package I would expect for like a Deshaun Watson.
Right.
And now you think of it, oh man, if that's what Stafford can get, what can Watson get? Oh my goodness. Like, it's going to be maybe 3 first-round picks at this point.
Right.
But yeah, I would definitely, if it was like something similar to that, oh, absolutely, I pulled the trigger on that. Absolutely.
A couple guys that I'm not completely still sold on, but I still support. Carson Wentz with Frank Reich still, to me, would kind of for argument's sake, we got Phillip Rivers, and as Colts fans, I have never liked Phillip Rivers.
Sure.
I never cared for Phillip Rivers, and he was okay last year, but I felt like if we could pull a trigger on Phillip Rivers, why not Carson Wentz and even Sam Darnold?
Yeah, I think the biggest question with Wentz is first, obviously he struggled, and also his contract is a very, very big contract. So I think in order to do that, the Eagles are going to have to eat some of that. Maybe you eat a good majority of that, but if I'm doing that, man, I want some kind of like we saw with Brock Osweiler years ago, right? Where basically the Texans just traded into the Browns for picks. Like I might have to get a couple picks in that as well if I'm going to take a guy like Carson Wentz and eat some of his massive contract that the Eagles signed him to. But Sam Darnold is one I am very much for right now, for sure, because I was kind of looking at it. And so I try not to hype it up like I did with Matthew Stafford. I felt like I kind of got people's hopes up, not intentionally, but got people's hopes up of it didn't happen and people were super sad and depressed. So with Sam Darnold, though, I think it makes a lot of sense. He's 23 years old, so he's probably as old as some of these rookie quarterbacks coming in.
Yep.
Obviously, he's been with the Jets, so he hasn't really had the chance to develop. I mean, we even saw with Ryan Tannehill, after he left Adam Gaze's system. I mean, you saw he's been thriving. Honestly, he's had a lot better career after that. So, yeah, I think for me, Sam Darnold's very interesting. And this is the argument I make, right? Because some people are trade up, and I would be okay with that. But you'd have to trade a lot, knowing that you'd have to fall in love with the guy and just trade up and all that stuff. But, with Sam Darnold, you probably wouldn't have to trade the farm like you would trading up. And this guy's got a lot of potential. I pulled up the clip from when the Colts played the Jets this past season. Sam Darnold made an incredible play early in that game where he basically just it was Andrew Luck-like type of play, right? So he's basically avoiding defenders, rolls to his right and finds a guy for a touchdown. And at that point, ties the game up. So I don't know. He's got a lot of potential. Obviously, he's got a lot of not good stuff that will have to be coached out of him.
Right.
But lots of potential there. And, I'm not really I wouldn't commit to Sam Darnold long term. Obviously, you don't really know what you have there. But I kind of look at this. You would have him at least one more year on his rookie contract, right? So he still would be cheap. You could potentially have him 2 more years if you exercise that 5th-year option, right? So you could have him for 2 years pretty cheap, especially if he's playing at a really good level.
Right.
And if you trade away for him and he's not a good quarterback, you don't pick up that option. It's essentially a 1-year deal at that point. I mean, you'd really just be giving up a third or I don't even know what it would take for Sam Darnold, 2nd or 3rd round pick, maybe somewhere around there.
Right.
Unless, teams start bidding and drive the price up. But yeah, that's probably where I stand on Sam Darnold. I like the potential if you can get him there for relatively cheap and put him in a system with a quarterback guru like Frank Reich, former quarterback there.
Yeah,
I would be all for that. I mean, I think out of all the trade options, that one's the one that intrigues me the most because I feel like we kind of know what Carson Wentz is at this point. We don't really know what a Sam Darnold is. I feel like he's, and my question, I guess, is has he been scarred playing with the Jets for the couple seasons he's been there? For I guess the 2 or 3 seasons he's played for them. That's my question. And we don't know right now, obviously. But that's something you'd have to weigh if you were the Colts for sure. But I like that. That's probably my most realistic one right now.
But realism is probably the thing to look at right now. I'll put it this way: from watching Sam Darnold tape at USC and watching with the Jets, I know we just lost Anthony Costanzo to retirement, but I don't think I've ever seen Sam Darnold with a competent offensive line like the Colts.
No.
So that would be kind of cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Matthew Stafford in a way, right? Where you've never really seen it with a good team around him. Best offensive line he's ever had. We even saw it with Phillip Rivers. Went from probably his worst season, one of his worst seasons in his career in 2019, to one of his better seasons in 2020 because he had those pieces around him, right? He had a good offensive line. He had a really good running game. He had some solid receivers, especially if you addressed receiver, which I think you probably should, maybe in free agency or somewhere else. I think there's really good potential that he is surrounded by so much talent that it brings out the best in him. And also, he played with Michael Pittman, Colts wide receiver at USC. So I think that there's that connection there.
And while
I like it.
I want to live as Chenault, but Michael Pittman has been just fine if he can stay healthy. Granted, that's the same way with Paris Campbell. I mean, I felt so sorry for him at the beginning of the year.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
No, he was so good with Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, I know. It was a bummer we only got to see him really for a game, and then he had that. That's just a hit that you're just there's nothing you can do about that.
Exactly.
I just feel bad for Paris Campbell. he's not. People say he's injury prone, and maybe that was a little bit his rookie year, but he never had an injury history, right, at Ohio State. Really, that last one was very, very unfortunate. Like 99% of people who take that hit are going out for the year. So it just sucks. And so, yeah, you're right. I hope he can get back to where he is, because he has been shown to be very electric when he gets the ball in his hands. And that was an element I felt like the Colts maybe were missing in their wide receivers a little bit. I mean, DeMichael Harris a little bit, but, having Paris Campbell just changes the dynamic of this offense, honestly.
Agreed. Speaking of dynamic offenses, Tom Brady chose Tampa Bay, and for right now, it looks like pretty obvious reasons. I learned this from the Pat McAfee show that Jim Irsay, in a long-winded press conference, in hindsight said, "Dang, I wish we could have had Tom Brady." He kind of thinks about that. What is your thoughts? Because I know we got Phillip Rivers, and we had to kind of cope with that.
Yeah.
Would you have even wanted Tom Brady, or that's a fine line to walk for me.
Yeah, I mean, as a Colts fan, I would say absolutely not from my fandom standpoint. But as just looking at it from an objective standpoint, I mean, I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, look, I get it. People hate Tom Brady, but if he gives us the best chance of the Super Bowl, I don't care if I've hated him for years. Kind of like Phillip Rivers, right? Obviously, we hate Brady a lot more. But I'm kind of like, man, I agree, because maybe you could have had him for a couple more seasons as opposed to Rivers only the 1 year. But, you do look at the team he has also. Like, when your number 4 receiving option is Antonio Brown, like, that tells you something right there about how good your team is. So, it's kind of like, well, would he have done as good with Indianapolis with less dynamic weapons? I don't know. But, hindsight's always 20/20, right? I mean, I felt like Rivers was fine for what you needed him to be. So, it's kind of like, you know what? Either of those guys probably would have been a pretty solid option there, but I think this one kind of got the Colts fan base a little bit less riled up than a Tom Brady would have done. Man, I don't know how many people probably would have stopped being Colts fans if that would have happened. But yeah, it's interesting that Jim Irsay said that. I know that there had been rumblings about that. I didn't know Jim Irsay actually said that. That's kind of interesting.
Well, again, I didn't see the quote, but I know Pat McAfee, who wouldn't have said anything if it wasn't there. So I was like, wow, that's dang. So staying with the big game, obviously with Tom Brady, Super Bowl is on Sunday. This show is being aired on Tuesday nights. I don't know if you've made your pick for your podcast or if you want to save it for that. But let's say you haven't made your pick, what are you looking forward to in this game, and who do you think wins, if you can give us that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. It's kind of interesting. It's like somebody used the whole comparison of Tom Brady being for a Star Wars reference, being Yoda, and then Patrick Mahomes being Baby Yoda. It's just the young versus the old kind of thing. So I'm really looking forward to two of, if Patrick Mahomes keeps doing what he's doing, he could be considered one of the top best quarterbacks of all time. So I'm really looking forward to that matchup right there. Those two guys facing off again. I mean, Patrick Mahomes looking for back-to-back Super Bowls. I mean, a decade ago, Brady was in this same spot, right? So it is very interesting to see that and see kind of maybe potential similarities there in those guys. So I'm looking forward to those two quarterbacks dueling. I think as far as the prediction goes, Tampa Bay, it's interesting. I'm kind of still shocked that they made the Super Bowl, because, looking at the regular season, I was they're very beatable in a lot of ways. Down. Yeah, they were very up and down, but I think now that they actually have all their receivers, we just see the arsenal they have. It's just absolutely insanity. But, saying that, I do think that the Chiefs will win this game.
Same.
Just because I think Patrick Mahomes can outduel Tom Brady, honestly. So I think it's going to be a little high-scoring game, because neither of these defenses, I guess, are, insane. That'll shut one of these quarterbacks down, I don't feel like. So I'm going to say 35-31, Kansas City going to take this one. It's going to be a close one. I have a feeling.
I'm also leaning. I haven't seen the betting odds yet. I don't know why I haven't looked at that, but I would definitely go over if the score was right, if the total was right. Okay. So I agree with you. It's going to be high scoring. I think it comes down to Eric Bieniemy versus Todd Bowles, which is weird because both those guys are black head coach, coordinators that kind of got snubbed for jobs recently.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But I do like that matchup there, because especially with Tyreek Hill going off in the first game. For me, I think the Chiefs cannot. They've started slow in a few playoff games recently, and that's the one thing that scares me. But I
Right.
mean, we'll see. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's something like last Super Bowl where the Chiefs kind of started off slow, and then Patrick Mahomes became Patrick Mahomes again, and
Woo!
I mean, I could see that happening, man. I really could. I mean, this guy is insane. I mean, he is the reason why I am scared to play in the AFC for a
Right.
long time.
So I have one last question for you. Well, not another question, just a little bit hype you up here. I know you host Bring the Juice podcast, or you co-host it. You're big on YouTube with your Colts stuff. You want to have any shout outs, little self promotion here before we let you go?
Well, sure, I guess. Yeah. So I mean, we were talking a little bit off air. So for those of you who maybe haven't followed it or really know the story, so I've been on like Twitter for a while, like Colts Twitter, but
Right.
I never really like found my niche, like what I like to do. I did a lot of like writing off and on for a few years there. I think I jumped on in like 2016, 2017, around there. Maybe even a little bit earlier than that now that I think about it. But so it's been a few years that I've been on there.
Right.
But then in 2019, I noticed there really wasn't a ton of like outside Colts podcasts, right? Like outside of like the media.
Thank you.
So it's still that way. I feel like there's only a few. But I kind of decided like, okay, I feel like I can do this. Like I like to talk and I like to talk about the Colts specifically. So I'm like, I'm just going to go for it. And lots of trial and error for sure, especially that first year. I mean, I look back at some of that stuff and I'm just like, what was I thinking? You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but it's just something where you just continue to get better, continue to improve, and just realizing, man, it's not about like me all the time. Like, I feel like a lot of people can come on here and just come on and podcast and try to make it about them all the time. And I'm like, that's just not what it's about, in my opinion. It's about promoting others. It's about producing, obviously, content, talking about what you love, and really not letting the haters get to you, man. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is weird that, it feels like there's just certain content creators that don't support each other. And I've always been like baffled by that. Like, why don't you? I mean, these people are taking their time and their energy to devote towards something that they love. Like, why wouldn't you support them? And not looking at it as a competition, but as a family. I mean, that's what it is. Like, we all support the same team. Ultimately, we all want the Indianapolis Colts to be Super Bowl champions every single year, right? That's why we're here. So I'm not about, promoting about me, because it's not about me. It's about the team. It's about the fans. Like, that's what it's about. And so, that's why I do it, man. I mean, it is. And like, if people like you just messaged me a little bit ago and said, hey, you want to come on? I'm like, absolutely. I would love to come on. Like, that's what it's about. It's not about me. It's about helping others out. So, that's kind of what I want to do it. And like YouTube's actually been crazy. It's been crazy how it's kind of like exploded over the past year. It actually kind of started free agency last year. So in about a month is when like it went crazy for us with some of the free agent news, the DeForest Buckner news, the Rivers news. Colts were pretty active last year in free agency, so that helped. So it's been a really cool journey since then, and I'm really looking forward, man, to how we continue to grow and how what the moves the Colts make, and I'm very thankful and very humbled for all the people who listen in and appreciate them.
And I want to not to unhumble you here, but I want to hype you up one more time. Thanks, Cody, for coming on. I think I speak for a lot of Colts fans who feel like we're not really a hyped up or media savvy team. Thanks for bringing us up, because I've been on Twitter since 2012. You're probably the first Colts fan I've actually ever seen like that. Wow, this guy actually is a spokesman for Colts fans. It's kind of cool to see. So I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for coming on.